Welcome in, everybody. Ready for another deep dive.
Absolutely, always ready to dig into these wild stories.
And we've got a wild one today, folks. It's about DIDDY, Sean Combs, as some might know him.
Yeah, serious accusations.
Really serious. We're talking about a lawsuit, all detailed in TMZ, alleging DIDDY assaulted and raped this woman, Ashley Parham.
Heavy stuff.
Yeah.
And it's important to approach these situations carefully. We're talking about accusations being made in a legal setting, so we've got to analyze the details, look at everything closely.
Exactly. And one of the most shocking details, at least to me, involves a TV remote. Parham claims DIDDY used it in the assault.
Yeah, that detail is, well, it's certainly something that grabs your attention. I mean, we never want to be sensationalistic, but you can't deny that this kind of detail just immediately raises the stakes.
Yeah.
And it makes it harder to look away, even if you wanted to.
For sure. And it really makes you wonder, how does it even get to this point? What happened? So let's back up a bit. This whole thing allegedly started back in February 2018. Parham meets a friend of DIDDY's at a bar. Pretty normal stuff.
Right. Seems almost commonplace.
Until this friend FaceTimes DIDDY. And while they're all chatting, Parham, get this, she tells DIDDY straight up that she thinks he was involved in Tupac's death.
Oh, wow. Talk about a bold move. I mean, that's DIDDY, you know.
Yeah.
You don't say that, right?
You would think. And according to the lawsuit, this little comment, well, it didn't go unnoticed.
Because a month later, DIDDY's friend invites Parham over to his place.
And guess who shows up?
DIDDY, with a knife, remembering that Tupac comment. At least that's what the lawsuit claims.
It's like, what could he have possibly been thinking?
Well, in the lawsuit's narrative, this is where that motive potentially comes in. Like, if it's true, it connects those earlier words from Parham to his actions later on. That's often key in these cases, especially in civil court, establishing those kinds of links.
So it's not just about what happened, but also the why. But then it gets even more complicated because now DIDDY's consultant, Christina Koram, she enters the picture.
Right. Parham alleges that Koram was there and even tried to dissuade DIDDY from using the knife. And then, it takes another turn, Parham claims Koram threatened to traffic her.
It's just layer upon layer of awful accusations.
Yeah, and if true, it really speaks to a power dynamic that sadly we see play out time and time again in cases like this. But again, it's crucial for everyone listening to remember that as of right now, these are just allegations. DIDDY, Koram, they both have every right to defend themselves in court.
Absolutely. Nothing's been proven yet. But we do have to address the details of the alleged assault itself, and I'll warn you, it's hard to even talk about. Parham accuses DIDDY of using that TV remote to assault her and then raping her, and it gets worse. She claims he directed 2 other men at the house to assault her as well, and then another man raped her vaginally.
This is where it gets incredibly difficult to even listen to, let alone discuss. But we have to understand the full weight of what's being alleged here. The language used in this lawsuit, it's graphic, it's disturbing, and it's meant to convey the severity of what Parham claims happened to her.
You're right. We can't shy away from the tough stuff. But we do need to remind everyone, this lawsuit, this one night, it's just one piece of a much larger legal situation.
Yeah, this is bigger than just this lawsuit. You see, there are over 120 other sexual assault lawsuits reportedly being prepped by this Texas attorney, Tony Busby. And DIDDY's at the center of those, too. We'll dive into all that later, but for now, our listeners should know this isn't an isolated incident, at least according to what we're seeing legally.
So we're talking serious accusations, potentially a massive legal battle brewing, and a whole lot of unanswered questions. But before we get ahead of ourselves, I think it's time we shift gears a bit and dive into what Parham says happened after the alleged assault, because it's just, well, it's a lot. So we just left off talking about the assault itself, and it's really heavy stuff. But according to this lawsuit, the alleged assault was just the beginning for Ashley Parham.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we often see that it's in the aftermath of incidents like this where the power dynamics become even more pronounced.
Exactly. And Parham's account of what happened after, well, it's disturbing, to say the least. She says that after assaulting her, DIDDY and the other men just left. They left her there, injured, traumatized, while they went outside to smoke.
Wow. If that's true, and again, we have to emphasize that these are just allegations, but if true, that detail speaks volumes, you know, it really paints a picture of the complete disregard for her well-being that Parham is alleging here. Just a stark image being left behind like that.
It's just heartbreaking to think about the feeling of isolation and vulnerability. And it gets worse. Parham says that she tried to escape, but DIDDY caught her. And instead of letting her go, he allegedly offered her money. money to stay quiet.
There it is. That element of silencing and intimidation. It's a pattern we see way too often in these types of cases, especially when you're talking about high-profile figures.
And it gets even more complicated because then Diddy, he calls his mother Janice Combs. And Parham alleges that Janice actually tried to convince her not to report the assault.
This is another layer that we often see, this idea of a protective circle around powerful individuals. Family members, close friends, they get involved, and it just makes everything that much more complex.
It really does. It's like, you hate to say it, but it's like something out of a movie. But this isn't a movie, it's real life with serious accusations. And as if things weren't already bad enough, Parham then says one of the men with Diddy fired a gun.
Whoa, okay, so now you're adding another layer of fear and urgency to this whole situation.
Yeah.
Even if the gun wasn't directly used against her, just the presence of a firearm like that completely changes the dynamic.
For sure, it ratchets up the intensity and danger, and what makes this even more disturbing is that Parham claims that even after all of this, when she reported it, she says she reported it to multiple police departments. Nothing happened.
No investigation.
That's what she claims in the lawsuit.
Wow. See, that's where things get really concerning. Because if that's true, it raises some serious questions about how these cases are handled, especially when you're dealing with someone as high profile as Diddy. Was there a proper investigation? Were there systemic issues at play that prevented a thorough look at her claims? These are all things that, as this lawsuit moves through the legal system, maybe we'll get some answers to.
So we're left with these disturbing accusations, no initial investigation, and a lot of uncertainty. Legally speaking, where do things go from here?
Well, Ashley Parham is being represented by these attorneys, Ariel Mitchell and Sean Perez. And it's important to understand this is a civil case, not a criminal case. So in this lawsuit, Parham, she's seeking financial compensation for what she alleges happened to her. And the burden of proof, it's lower in a civil case. She doesn't have to prove Diddy is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, which would be the standard in a criminal case. She only has to prove her case by a preponderance of the evidence.
So it sounds like this is going to be a complicated legal battle, to say the least.
Oh, absolutely. And remember those other 120 sexual assault lawsuits we talked about earlier? Those were being handled by a different attorney, Tony Busby. And those could very well end up in criminal court, which would mean the stakes for Diddy just got a whole lot higher.
And to be clear, as of right now, Diddy hasn't publicly responded to any of these allegations.
And remember, he has every right to remain silent. It'll be interesting to see what he does choose to do, though. Does he address these accusations directly? Or does he just let the legal process play out? I guess time will tell.
It's a lot to process, that's for sure. And it's a good reminder that regardless of what happens with this lawsuit, with any of them really, these allegations, they bring up some much bigger questions about power, about accountability, about what happens when someone comes forward with a story like this. And that's something we're going to have to grapple with as we continue this conversation. But for now, let's take a quick break and we'll come back to unpack all of this a little bit more.
Yeah, it's a lot to wrap your head around. And even with all the legal stuff, lawsuits and investigations, it really makes you think about the bigger picture. I mean, regardless of how this all plays out for Diddy, these accusations bring up these big questions about power, about accountability. What happens when someone comes forward with a story like this?
It's about those power imbalances, isn't it? I mean, Diddy's fame and wealth, if those things were used to silence someone or to pressure them, that's a huge problem. Absolutely. And that's what makes this whole thing so disturbing, right? Mm-hmm. It's not just about the accusations themselves, but also about the systems that might allow this kind of behavior to happen in the first place or might prevent victims from coming forward.
Right. And when you hear Parham say she reported it multiple times and nothing happened, no investigation initially, that's a huge red flag.
Yeah, right.
Makes you wonder, were there failings in the system? Did bias or something else prevent a real investigation from happening?
It's a stark reminder that everyone deserves to be heard. It shouldn't matter who you're accusing. Everyone deserves to have their claims taken seriously.
100%.
Yeah.
Due process, a fair system, those are vital. And look, Diddy has the right to defend himself, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's equally important that anyone making accusations, they need to be supported. They need to be able to come forward without fear.
It's a tough balance, right? Because you need both. But this whole situation really highlights how important it is. It's not just about these individuals. It's about how we as a society deal with these situations.
Yeah. It forces us to look at those uncomfortable truths, how power can be misused. And it shows how important believing survivors is, while also, and this is crucial, remembering due process, innocent until proven guilty. It's not about immediately condemning. It's about making sure everyone's voice is heard.
It's complicated, no easy answers, but these are conversations we need to be having. As we wrap up here, I'm curious, what are your final thoughts? What can we do to make sure everyone feels safe coming forward, where justice is actually served no matter who you are?
That's the million-dollar question. Honestly, I think it starts with awareness, educating people, talking about consent, respect, empowering people to recognize and report abuse, and just as important, supporting survivors, making sure they know they're not alone.
That's a great place to leave it. This has been heavy, but so important to discuss. We'll keep an eye on how the story unfolds. For now, keep asking questions, stay informed. These are conversations that need to